All right, guys, welcome back to Decoding Babylon. And today we got a very special episode. Not that all episodes aren't special, but we're going to be talking about the new Aquaman trailer because obviously that's noteworthy and worth a whole podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, we're going to talk more. We're going to talk about Atlantis as well. Brian, I had a follower send this to me, and of course, I had to send it right over to Brian. Brian, first thoughts on the Aquaman trailer?
You know, the first thought I thought was the opening scene straight up was like child sacrifice. That was like the first thing that went through my head. I saw the kid. I was like, oh no, this kid's going to be sacrificed. And sure enough, towards the end of the thing, you're like, there's more.
Like the first thing the guy who sent it to me said, he's like, all right, we're already talking about like just Aquaman in himself. I mean, just think about it. So this is he's part human, he's part not human. I think Aquaman in the mythology is his mom was the queen of Atlantis. And so she had an affair with a man. Yep. They had a son who can swim under the water, breathe under the water, and talk to the fishes. And so obviously it comes from this mythical city, Fishman, which doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't true, Atlantis. But what's interesting, immediately it starts talking off about his son, and he says, we're different than everyone else. Well, so it's like, different way, and it's interesting. He holds the trident right over his face. I mean, of course, like, isn't it interesting how like the mythologies of the devil, he has a pitchfork, and then it just so happens that Poseidon has the trident. Aquaman has the trident. I mean, is that a pitchfork? I mean, it kind of looks like it, doesn't it?
I love how it says like we're special, we're different than everyone. We are Nephilim, guys. We're Nephilim. That's what he is. That's what Aquaman is. It's very apparent. It's interesting that they were referring to like the bloodline lineages in this because that also kind of has an equated component to being Nephilim-esque, you know, the bloodline that you came from.
Yeah, so you have, so just right off the bat, you have these people who are human, but not quite, right? And then they're talking about the bloodlines. And then the villain in Aquaman series is Black Manta. And so they literally say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to basically take down Aquaman, even if it means making a deal with the devil. And sure enough, they show him obviously it's just a trailer, so we haven't seen the movie, and I don't know if I will, but probably. But anyways, he put some green thing together, and all of a sudden his eyes turn like bright, fiery green. And then they show a vision of this place that looks like a green version of hell, I guess.
Yeah,
and
green hell.
And if he's making a deal with the devil, I mean, this being looks just like the devil, and it basically says, if you free me, like I'm going to give you the power to destroy your enemies. And you're like, oh my goodness! And it's like, well, what I found very significant, other than the fact that obviously this being looks super evil, he looked like he had like a cone head or an elongated skull. Brian, did you notice that?
Yeah. And he looks like Sauron. He looks like a green version of Saruman or Sauron. Yeah, Sauron. Yeah, and like it was funny because even it's clearly alluding to the fact of making a deal with the devil to gain powers or abilities. It's like teaching people, hey, look, if you make deals with the devil, you will get abilities, which is what happens, by the way, guys. Like for those that don't know, like people make deals with Satan or demons to gain abilities. Like that's why they do it. They're not just doing it because they hate God or they're mad at the world. They do it because they want something. They want power. They want ability. They want fame. They want money. They want fortune. That's what they're doing. And this movie is totally promoting that. It's like, hey, look, if you're not born special like Aquaman, who's a Nephilim, then you can become special like the other dude, Manta, who guess what? You just got to make a deal with the devil, guys, and that's it. You make the deal and you get the special powers, and then you can be just like Aquaman.
No, that's a very good point because I don't believe At least I watched the first Aquaman. I was telling Brian, I was like, I tried to watch the whole thing. I think I might have watched the whole thing in like 3 or 4 tries. I don't think I got the whole thing. I don't even remember exactly, but I do remember the Black Manta character. I don't believe he had superpowers. So he had like a suit that gave him almost like an Iron Man, except it's under the water type deal. And so in this one, yeah, so like Aquaman would again be Nephilim because he's not quite human. And then this guy has to make a deal with the spirit, the demon, the devil who's down somewhere in this version of hell. Yeah, right. Exactly what Brian said, that I think this is what people don't quite get about, like when we say they worship the devil or they worship Satan or they're Luciferians. It's not necessarily like we worship our God because he's good and because he saved us and like because he is good. But it's like these people worship themselves in order to get things for themselves. They do what needs to be done. So it's not necessarily their love for their God. But I mean, I guess some of them, obviously some of them do love him, but it's like they love the things that this God can give them. What can he do for them? Versus obviously what our God has done for us. And it's like he did that before we decided to follow him.
Yeah, it's love of self. People mistakenly realize that, like, they're like, oh, they worship devil because they love the devil. No, it's love of self, bro. It's like literally you worship Satan because you love yourself, and he gives you your desires of your flesh in the fleshly sense. You know what I mean? He gives you what you want in the flesh of yourself, the selfishness component of you. That's why people worship Satan. They're not worshiping because they think he's cool. I mean, I'm sure there's maybe some people at the high levels that actually like Satan in some regard, but it's all about selfishness. That's why if you read about the Satanistic belief and view, like at the base level, they tell you, oh yeah, we don't actually believe in Satan, and we actually call it Satanism as an allegory, as like mocking it in a sense. They're like, yeah, we call it Satanism because really it's just like a funny thing to say, but really what we believe in is worship of self. And they tell you, but that is what Satanism is. It is worship of self. It's worship of your own desires. Is what you want.
Yeah, correct. And it's interesting. So like, where does that come from? It comes from the serpent in the garden promising you can be as gods. I will give you the knowledge to be as gods. If you eat from this tree that God said not to, you can be as gods. And it's, of course, like you can imagine this devil is telling the Black Manta, if you free me, if you do what I need you to do, I will make you as a god in order to beat the god, the half god, the demigod Aquaman. And what's also what's a neat little segue is, so in the most recent Black Panther movie, which by the way I did not get through that because it was awful. It was so long. These movies are so long and so boring. They have some nuggets of interesting things regarding, like, obviously ancient angels, that topic of like clearly the story of the Nephilim once again. So in Marvel's version of Aquaman was named Namor, the Submariner, Prince Namor, who was a prince of Atlantis. He was the prince of Atlantis. And so very interesting in the newest Black Panther movie, Namor appears, and he appears as Quetzalcoatl. He appears as the plumed serpent.
Wait. So he's called Namor. It's the same Namor in Aquaman.
Oh well. I can't remember what Aquaman's real name is in the comic books, but no, Aquaman is DC, and then Submariner was Marvel.
Oh yeah,
So they're very similar. They're very similar characters, and they're both really old. So I'm not even sure who's first because Submariner is a very old character. Obviously, neither of these guys just made this stuff up. Obviously, they got these from older mythologies about Atlanteans.
The other thing is, if they're not getting it themselves directly from mythologies and mythos, like they're being inspired by something demonic that's giving it to them. And people don't understand, like, why? Like, why do they put these secret messages in all your stuff? Why do they hide the secret codes in everything that you do and watch? Like, why? Okay, there's a reason for it. The reason is to distort the truth. It's been going on for centuries. Like, everything that you watch is a distortion, perversion of the truth. It's filling your head with lies and theories and stories of what they are, so that you don't understand where they originally were, which was Nephilim. They're the fallen angels. They're trying to distort everything you know about them, erase it, make it like hidden, and make it seem like it's fairy tales. And that's the same thing that has been going on since Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, since Lord of the Rings. Like, like all these things, they're telling you stories to pervert the origin of Jesus and Christianity and the Bible and the truth and the Nephilim. That's what this all is. It's just a distortion, perversion.
Isn't that kind of interesting too? Like even the phrase fairy tales. I mean, we're told that fairies, again, I mentioned in my one little podcast saying that fairies have been Disney-fied, where fairies are all of a sudden Tinkerbells and real cute, and it's all real fun stuff. These pretty little pixies of the forest and stuff. But as Brian and I,
fairies are so wicked.
We're going to go into that more obviously in the upcoming episodes of Ancient Angels. But they're spirits. Like I said, these are the spirits that they talk about on All Hallows Eve, and they're demonic spirits. And it said so if the current mythology or the current like myths of the day says aliens are abducting people, well, back in the day it was fairies. So obviously you don't think about fairies abducting people, but I mentioned, isn't it interesting in like the Peter Pan kind of like mythos was that Peter Pan sneaks into children's rooms. Pan, the deity, Pan plays the panpipes. He has Tinkerbell go before him, almost as his little scout, in order for Pan to kidnap children, take them to Neverland. They never grow up because, hey, they never come back from Neverland.
Never, or Neferland. It's Neferland. It's not Neverland. It's Nefer.
Yeah, and so it's interesting if you think about it. So a fairy tale. So what is a fairy tale? It's like literally talking about the demonic spirits. These stories, obviously, and they all seem to glorify magic, witchcraft. They glorify beings like Peter Pan, which obviously doesn't sound like great. When you actually really think about it, it doesn't really sound like a good story. Atlantis.
No, Pan is the goat god who kidnaps children. Like it's literally all related to demonic kidnapping. Who are the children of the goat? The seed of Satan. Oh yeah, that's the Nephilim. They're the children of the goat. That's the seed of Satan. They're the kidnappers. It's not. And when you say the word alien abduction, it doesn't mean that aliens are being abducted. It's aliens that are doing the abducting. So when you say the word kidnapping, it's not kids that are being napped. Because kid didn't refer to children. Kid refers to the child of a goat, the seed of Satan. It's the kids that were doing the napping. That's why adults can be kidnapped. Why don't we have it adult napped? Oh, adult nap? No. Kidnapping is referring to who was doing the napping. Yeah. The kids were doing the napping. The children of the goat, the seed of Satan. Those are the kids. That's where that's coming from. And that's why Peter Pan, the word panic, comes from the god Pan, which is further developed from Peter Pan. But Pan is where we get the word panic, or pandemonium actually comes from the same word. It means panic is people would show up and they would panic when they would see Pan. And it was an Aramaic word. Paneon is where it comes from. So it's like these words all tie together once you start to understand the truth of what's really going on and how it weaves all together as one. You're like, you see the story. You see Peter Pan, you see how wicked it is. You see really what's going on. And then he takes the children to Neferland. Well, Nefer is the word for beautiful one in Egyptian. It also refers to giants, or Nephilim. Yeah. That's why it's called Neferland. And then you see in Neferland, there's the mermaids. And you're like, well, what were the mermaids? Those are the sirens that were turned from making the Nephilim. The women that made it with the giants, they were called sirens. They were made into sirens, which that's not what sirens are, but we perceive them as mermaids. But then you see the little children, the lost boys. What are the lost boys dressed up as? Half animal, half whatever. Yeah. They're all wearing like little hoodies, like I'm a bear, I'm a skunk, I'm a this. It's all Nephilim. It's all ties to human-animal hybridization, perversion, Nephilim. And then you see even the Indians in Neferland. There's Cannibal Cove, where they're eating people. And then who's eating people in Neverland? Okay, Cannibal Cove, that's disturbing. I thought this is a wonderful land. No, they're having Cannibal Cove? Come on. And then the Indians go, how? Like this in the fairy tale, in the Peter Pan thing. Oh, yeah. What is how from? How was actually not what Native Americans ever said. They never said how, but they would put up their hand and they would say, show me your hand, because they wanted to see how many fingers you had up in some stories. And so you're like, well, why do they want to know how many fingers you put up? Because there was people that looked normal but had 6 fingers because they were part of the inbreeding of the giants that would sneak into camps, act like they were normal, and then they would bring the giants in to kill and eat the people in the village. So the Native Americans started doing this, show me your hand. And it was like a sign of like, look at this. Do you have 6 fingers? Because we're not going to be your friend if you got 6 fingers, because you've been inbred with the giants. And that's actually where that comes from. And it's funny. We made up the term how, because it was like, how many fingers do you have on your hand? That wasn't what the Native Americans said. They never said how. This was their way of showing that they were human. It was like this. It was like, show me your hands to see that you're human, so that you don't eat us. Like, this is literally where this comes from. But the story of Peter Pan has all of this Nephilim-esque knowledge and understanding woven into it with fairies and fairy tales and whatever. And I think it's fine. I think it's interesting that it's called a fairy tale, because it's almost like we're tales in humans, like a thing that identified you as a fairy, because, or as a hybrid as well. Like, there was little subtle things that might have definitively pointed out that you were something hybridized. And so, anyways, fairies is totally demonic. And if you look up original pictures of fairies, they look like little demons. And if you look up in like 16th century and 15th century drawings of fairies, they look like little demons with bat wings. And these are what fairies were, because they'd come and they'd take your children, they'd take it away, or take you and then drink your blood and kill you and replace you, and terrible stuff.
What's interesting, though, again, it's like, so you can say it's like the fairy tales, but also the mythologies. Obviously, I think in today's day, we kind of see them almost as interchangeable: mythology, fairy tales. But what ties both, I guess, Aquaman and Namor, which is Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, or Amaru. Amaru would be another plumed serpent from South America. So again, like I've talked about that before, about how I believe that that's why America is called America, not because of Maragana Vespucci, but they were the natives Amadu. There worship a god called Amaru or Maruka, and like literally there's different deviations of his name. But again, like, again, we all know that nobody's discovered that place that was already inhabited by massive amounts of people and pyramids and everything. But what's interesting, so these mythologies of the natives in South America, they talked about a plumed serpent, they talked about Quetzalcoatl, and they didn't mean a literal serpent. They talked about a man. He wasn't the only one who came there. And interestingly enough, these men were described as being white, they had beards, and they left a place that was flooded, which is sort of amazing when you think about, like, okay, so in the story of the Black Panther, they're showing Prince Namor, a prince of Atlantis, being shown to literally be the plumed serpent. So, I mean, obviously these mythologies are tying in. It's like, again, how much of this is coming from a real place? And obviously then we get fully bored into like the mythology behind Atlantis, whether it was the city, the city state, country, empire, whatever you want to call it, that came from, the ancient Greeks and Plato.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the story of Atlantis, because it's very obviously alluding to a moment in time where something was destroyed with a flood, which kind of points to what else? The story of Noah's flood, right? And so it's like the religion that's tied to Atlantis is more than likely the perspective and the story and the history is tied to when Nephilim ruled the earth, when they were the kings of the earth before the flood happened. And it's like there's a lot of tethered components, but there's also things that just don't really line up with a lot of other historical things about Atlantis. And that's because this was a pre-flood civilization construct. You know what I mean? It was like something that was before the flood that was totally wiped out. And so the only things that you might see about Atlantis that kind of lines up is things that, like the Anunnaki, or, the stuff in the older stuff, like some stories, you might find some limited components to this novel tale in a sense, like, but it's going to be a lot of destroyed information because of it was destroyed already in the flood.
Yeah, well, let me try to just give it like a brief synopsis of, okay, so whether you believe all the fantastical stuff about Atlantis, historically Plato talked about it, and he did not say this is a made up story. He didn't say it was an allegory. Obviously, you can draw your own conclusions from it. But obviously, we get shown like what Atlantis was. It was like a bubble city under the ocean now, and people are still living there. We're not saying that. But obviously, I thought very early on in going down this rabbit hole, a lost civilization is not very hard to believe. I mean, there's evidence of lost civilization.
No, there's plenty of them.
There's evidence of lost civilization everywhere. Like, again, like, because if these people, the people who were a little more primitive, who didn't claim to build the pyramids in South America, I mean, who did? Obviously, even like the Anasazi in America, it's like, who are the Anasazi? Well, Anasazi is not even necessarily a people. It just meant ancient ones. So it's like, who were they? Well, we don't know because they disappeared. So that by definition is a lost civilization. So obviously the idea that there was cataclysms that could have claimed an advanced civilization, that's not hard to believe. I mean, it's only hard to believe if you believe that scientists, archaeologists know everything. They've got nothing wrong. When of course they're proven wrong all the time. Places like Göbekli Tepe kind of throw off their timeline. They don't have any real explanation for it. Who did it? When? What? But anyways, the story of Atlantis is told by Plato, but he got it from, I believe, Herodotus, who got it from Solon. So like it was generations away.
It's like his cousin,
and
right?
Solon, I'm not sure if it was like uncle, some kind of like like a great uncle. Solon goes to Egypt, and he's told from the priests of Egypt that I guess the Athenians were once a real great people and they did great things, including fight off the Atlanteans. And so he tells the story of Atlantis, that Atlantis was this kind of advanced kingdom at the time. It had 10 different, I guess, king's sons of it, and it was founded by Poseidon. So Poseidon had a human wife, the god of the water, the god of the sea, Poseidon, fathers 5 sets of twins, including, I guess, Atlas, and they have this very advanced race. And I think they believe they took over large portions of Europe and North Africa. And this place was somewhere west of the Pillars of Hercules. So the Pillars of Hercules would be like the Rock of Gibraltar, at least what people think. So it was basically like a continent like the size of Texas or bigger. And it was divided into 10 kingdoms. And there was some kind of a circular moat system in the main capital of Atlantis.
Which they believe from that map, it's the Eye of the Sahara, that map, because you can see it from a satellite view. There looks like a little ring with another ring with another ring.
Well,
you know what I'm talking about?
So guys like, if you guys have followed Jimmy from Bright Insight, this guy named Jimmy, he did some work on, I think he went on Rogan to talk about, there is a crazy looking kind of thing in North Africa called the Eye of the Sahara. And it does, I believe that there was some kind of like fossilized sea life around that area, which is weird. But again, like, I think some people get a little twisted, like the city of Atlantis versus Atlantis. Atlantis was like, again, it was a country bigger than Texas, or a kingdom, had 10 different kings. But again, like, to get further into it, so eventually it kept on trying to take over Athens or ancient Greece, and they fought them off. Well, eventually, I guess the divine lineage, again, so if Poseidon was the god, likely a fallen angel, if this story has any truth to it, came down, had Nephilim sons. The further the Nephilim sons, basically, as they continue to have other sons, the divine lineage dwindled. It became ever more corrupt. And then eventually, the Zeus and the other gods decided this place needed to be judged by earthquakes and floods. And so the Athenians, the ancient Athenians, battled off Atlantis, but they were destroyed by an ancient flood and earthquakes too.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
And you're like, okay, so if this is an allegory, this sounds like a very good allegory for the days of Noah, as far as I can tell, because it's totally. Like you have, like, literally you have a fallen angel, like a major one, Poseidon, which is, if you guys look at the mythology, it's like Poseidon is the god of the water, and then Zeus is the god of the sky. They're brothers. They're basically, they look exactly the same, and it's like, so he's a major, figure in this ancient world. And and his sons become ever more corrupt. And eventually there's like, it probably breaks down to where they're cannibalistic giants at the end. And the gods decide to destroy this place because it's too wicked.
Yep. That's totally it's very obvious when all the places are destroyed by a flood that you're like in fires and earthquakes. You're like, really? Is that really what it was? Or was it just like the major gods that decided was just Yahweh who decided that y'all are wicked, y'all need to go? Like,
well, right. Well, isn't it interesting? So if you read the book of Revelation as well, like, okay, so when God is going to destroy the earth for the second time, but with fire, he uses angels to carry out the wrath of God. So I think it's very likely that obviously God is the man in charge. So he is giving out jobs for the angels to do. So I think it's very likely that you could even see, if there was more detail about the judgment of the earth in the days of Noah, I could imagine that that God was sending the angels, his angels,
Mm-hmm.
to go destroy the place. I mean, so like it's it's very likely that could exactly happen. So when we believe, we're not a polytheistic people. We believe in one God, one true God. But again, the ancients would they from their perspective, it would be the main God told the other gods to go destroy this place. And like I said, it lines up when you know that they are kind of telling the same story as us.
The gods that really are the gods, they're just angels too. That's what, like, they're just fallen angels. So how are they any different? Yeah, they're Elohim. So how are they any different than what God sends for his judgment? You know what I mean? Like it would be the same thing. They would perceive it the same way.
Well, it's interesting. So even in the, if you go a little deeper into the story of Atlantis, was at one point the 10 sons of Poseidon used to meet and they would discuss the law, and their laws were literally written on a sacred pillar, which you could almost imagine what that would be. Would probably be an obelisk.
Tepe?
It would be like maybe like an obelisk. An obelisk.
Maybe it was Göbekli Tepe, bro. Yeah, it is an obelisk too. Yeah.
Well, it could have been. I mean, it could have been for sure that. But what they did was they met at a temple to Poseidon. They sacrificed bulls to him, and so like there was a bull cult basically to Poseidon, and they drank the blood of the bulls with wine. And so like they mixed the wine in the blood of the bulls as they were doing this thing. And what I thought was very interesting is like so just think about like in the book of Revelation, it's like there's like 10 kingdoms, right? It's almost like there's a head wound that like it heals. Is it possible that it's talking more about like the beast with the head wound? Is it possible that it is the reborn Atlantean empire that like kind of comes back? Manly P. Hall and a lot of the Freemasons talked about America being the new Atlantis, like this idea of like that you could have like I said, there's obviously the 10 kingdoms. Could it be like that this new world government is kind of almost like Atlantis reborn? And I wonder this when it was like, so the whore of Babylon gets drunk on the blood of the saints. So like these kings of Atlantis, these princes of Atlantis, were getting drunk on blood and bull's blood and wine.
What if the 10 sons in Atlantis are literally there was like 10 Nephilim rulers, and those 10 Nephilim rulers like basically re-inhabit people towards the end times, and it's the same 10 nations, but they're just being inhabited by the 10 supreme Nephilim rulers at one point, just the ghosts of them, or the spirits of them rather.
Well, I have to look at the exact verse, but I know that there's a verse where it's like it talks about the kings, and it's like 5 are fallen and stuff like that, and like there's one who hasn't been yet, and all like
one who will be.
Yeah, it's very strange, kind of like So like, is there some merit to that, where like some of these major Nephilim kings are basically inhabiting bodies, and then this is part of like the end times is again like that's what's interesting is that, like and I've wondered this because it's like, when you see like just about the pyramids, like, so that if the pyramids are they the evidence of a connected civilization? Is this partly where like if Atlantis was, ruling over these parts of the world, did they set up, is that evidence of it? Is the fact that, I mean, guess what's North Africa? Egypt, it's like, did they put the pyramids there? Because I said, as I'm of the belief, and I believe Brian is too, is that those pyramids were not built by the dynastic Egyptians. They talked about things that happened before they were there, and I believe that they stayed there, and obviously they claimed a relative, like a lineage back to the people who did it. But I don't think that they claimed to do it. So that's what's funny is like I was talking to the trumpet on one of my live casts, and it was, how that the Israelites didn't build the pyramids. Well, at least the Great Pyramids, because in the story of the Exodus, remember when the Pharaoh was getting mad at Moses and the Israelites, and he said he wasn't going to give them straw anymore to make their bricks? Well, guess what? There's giant stones used to create the Great Pyramid. They weren't made out of bricks. The Tower of Babel was made out of bricks. Remember, they learned how to make bricks. And if you look at the Step Pyramid over like a Dozier's pyramid, where they claims the oldest one, it's made of small bricks. I believe that the reason that one looks the oldest is because it was made by people like us, and not like the Atlanteans or the ancient Athenians, whoever were ruled by these crazy Nephilim kings.
Craziness. There's so much. There's so much into that. Guys, download our video and watch it. That's all I would say about that. Because when it gets into that,
as we wrap this up, it really is. It's kind of like I just couldn't help see it. It's like, but I mean, it's all over the place when you understand like that when you start talking about partial humans like Aquaman, who they're partially human but they're partially divine basically, and they have extra powers. They're super powered. And then you have deals with the devil. You have lost civilization. You have floods, flooded kingdoms. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. It's called Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Again, so all these ancients talk about the golden age that was destroyed and judged by gods. Guys, this is the days of Noah. This is the story of the ancient angels that we talk about. Brian and I talk about all the time, and it's like it makes it so easy as for it to make content because it's like this is what they want. They want the days of Noah back, and I guess that's exactly why Jesus said that when he returns, it will be just like the days of Noah. And it's like, guys, that's what they want. Can't you tell?
We're seeing it now. It's happening right before our eyes. They're bringing into the genetic hybridizations coming back. All of it's about to happen, and people are going to be caught off guard. And you're going to be like, oh, whoa, maybe God isn't real. Maybe aliens are real. Maybe genetic whatever is. Nah, dude, this is alien angel technology from long, long ago. It's been there. It's been there for a very long time. I just saw a post. Somebody was talking about how in the alien communities, people are beginning to realize there's like a shift happening in the alien community where they're beginning to realize that the old gods are actually aliens. The people are starting to see it now. And it's funny because it's like you're shifting to the old gods. That means like, what is our world's going to become like more hyper religious than it ever has been, but they're going to be worshiping the wrong gods. Cause that's what it seems like happens in Revelation, to be completely honest. And that's where we're going right now. It looks like.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. Of course, I said this is why it's timely, and obviously we know this is why like God was involved when Brian and I were working on this project. Where it's like, again, they're trying to write aliens back into our history. So when aliens keep being reintroduced, it's like this is not new. This is the old gods, and so this gives people answers for all the questions people say. Well, what about the pyramids? Those are weird, right? Well, again, so this is like whether you want to believe in science, you're okay. You can believe in this because obviously science would say, oh yeah, there's likely other beings from other worlds. If you want to believe they were gods, the Anunnaki, well, go right ahead and worship them as gods as well. And guess what? You might be able to be like gods through some kind of genetic evolution, whatever, like mad science. And again, like the New Agers are saying, yeah. Except it'll be like a spirit thing. It'll be all, all crystals and everything. Guys, this is like I said, this seems to me like the age of deception. This is like this, but we could be talking about the strong delusion. Because again, like we've always said, if these beings came back, if an Atlantean showed up, Atlantean or somebody who claimed to be from, the Palladians and said they were a god and they looked the part, it would be pretty hard to argue with them if like you didn't know, if you weren't grounded in the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Like it would be very, very difficult to argue with them when you see somebody doing superpowers and making genetically modified human-esque things.
Talking to fish and breathing underwater. I mean, obviously we know that's a little bit fantastical, but I mean but I guess this is why what we're doing is like, it sounds crazy, but again, like truth is stranger than fiction when you believe that like some of this stuff likely was. There's more truth to the stories of like Aquaman than you'd actually believe. And obviously we're not trying to say this is a documentary, but we're saying you should check out our documentary and you should share it with people who don't really get this. Like, especially people, I believe that our documentary is specific for very good for people who obviously are interested in aliens, or they're people in the church that have been completely blind to anything spiritual. And I think this is like, this is a good one. Obviously you use your own discernment of who you think would like it. But I think that more people they've been connecting dots like we have, but they got some big gaps in them. And I think that this gives a biblical basis for what we believe. And, but yeah, guys, yeah, exactly. But guys, please share this video. Please like it. If you guys subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, and all the apps, because obviously there's a lot of persecution. Let's just put it that way of guys who are talking about the things we're talking about these days. So yeah,
Yep.
pray for us, and if you guys like
Pray
what
for
we
us
do,
always.
yeah, pray for us, please. Yeah, regardless. And if you guys do like what we do, please support us by like either like renting, purchasing our movie, or sharing it with somebody who might. So
awesome. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
God bless you guys. Good night.